We are excited to have one of our most common guests, one of our most popular guests, if not the most popular guest. He is a political scientist and professor of international relations at the University of Chicago, has written many books on international relations, has proven particularly prescient in his views on Ukraine and Russia and the war that the West has been supporting there when very few people were saying what he was saying. He was saying it very loudly, and I think a lot of people will acknowledge that he's been vindicated. We always love having him on our show. He's very, very informed and provides a lot of clarity into some of the most important issues that we're facing. Welcome, Professor Mearsheimer, to System Update. It's always great to see you.
Glad to be here, Glenn.
So, as you know, I can't wait to talk about other things than current wars, but we have to keep talking about these current wars because the United States is financing them and arming them and using its standing in the world to keep them going. So let's start with the war in Gaza that Israel is prosecuting and has already been prosecuting for 8 months, killed 35,000 people. Certainly that's a conservative number given how many people are under the rubble that they can't remove and can't count. But we just had a situation where the world watched dozens of women and children being incinerated in a fire and having no working healthcare system because their hospitals have been bombed. And now Israel says that this war will continue until at least the end of the year, for another 6 or 7 months at least. So I think you can look at that in two ways. One is you can say this shows that Israel is really determined to eliminate Hamas, even if it means destroying the entire population of Gaza and Gazans themselves. Or it could mean that Israel is so desperate because they know they can't achieve that war aim that they just want to keep the war going. How do you view the announcement by Israel that they will keep this war going until at least the end of this year?
Well, I think it's important, Glenn, to understand what Israel's main goal here is. It's not to defeat Hamas, and it's not to get the prisoners back. The main goal is to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And what they're doing is, number one, killing large numbers of people, and number two, making Gaza unlivable. If you just sort of look at what the Israelis have done, destroying hospitals, destroying schools, destroying administrative buildings, destroying the homes, or badly damaging the homes of, 75+% of the population, they're making the place unlivable. I would also note to you that a lot of people are dissatisfied that Benjamin Netanyahu does not have a plan for the day after. My view is the reason he doesn't have a plan for the day after is he doesn't expect the Palestinians to be there. So it's important to understand that what the Israelis want to do is keep the pressure on the Palestinians and see if they can cleanse Gaza. So that's what's going on. And I think that for that reason, this war will continue for a long time to come. And the Israelis will do very little to help the Palestinians get back to some sense of a normal life.
So what you're describing as the real goal of the Israelis in this war, and I want to make clear that it's not just you saying this, but top Israeli officials, part of the government, have often admitted that their goal is to take back both the West Bank and Gaza, to flatten Gaza, to make it essentially a place where no Arabs can live, and then the Israelis can go in, clean it up, and rebuild it, and then it will be theirs. What you're describing, what those Israeli officials have said they're trying to accomplish, is clearly the core definition of genocide. It's the cleansing of a certain group of people based on ethnicity or religion from a place, regardless of the motives. You have the International Court of Justice that just ordered Israel not to conduct a military operation inside Rafah because of the view that this will be a crime against humanity, far too many civilians will die, and they have a pending question of whether Israel is guilty of genocide and war crimes, which is supported not just by South Africa, but by many other countries. And then you have the United States, which is the main country funding and arming this war and protecting it, obviously being complicit and aiding and abetting it in every way. Do you think that the world now watching the International Court of Justice issue orders only for Israel to say, we don't care about that, we're going to ignore it, and for Joe Biden to say, and for other members of Congress to say, we might actually punish the International Court of Justice if they impede Israel. What effect will that have on how Israel is perceived and how the United States is perceived in the world?
Well, you want to remember, Glenn, it's not just the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, although it is playing an immensely important role here. It's also the ICC, right? It's the ICC that is trying to get arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his defense minister, Yoav Gallant. So there's sort of a 1-2 punch here. My view is that this is going to do enormous damage to Israel's reputation over time. What's happening here is the ICJ and the ICC are creating facts. They're writing lengthy reports. They're issuing judgments. And these reports and judgments will be in the historical record forever. And they are a black mark on Israel's reputation that is never going to go away. It's also going to be a black mark on our reputation as well, because as you said, we are complicit in what has become a genocide.
Rhetoric that the United States used when it came to Vladimir Putin and to that war and the war in Ukraine was that their goal was to reestablish or to affirm and preserve what they called a rules-based international order. They heaped praise on the International Court of Justice when it concluded that Putin and other Russian officials were guilty of war crimes. And now you have this scenario where when you have a BRICS summit in South Africa says, we want Putin on our soil, but we're obligated by this convention of which we're a signatory to turn him over to the court because he is now deemed a war criminal. And yet at the same time, the U.S. lost in the 1980s in the same court and then immediately withdrew and proclaimed itself immune, even enacted a law saying it had the right to use military force to remove any American officials being held in The Hague. This seems to me to be a kind of turning point because, as you've pointed out many times, we're not in a world any longer where the U.S. is the sole superpower. It is now a multipolar world where you do have China exploiting this argument that the U.S. isn't just a hypocrite, but the biggest threat to a rules-based international order. Do you think that there's real damage, not just to Israel, but to the United States from everything the world is seeing in this?
Sure. I mean, the United States went to great lengths to create the liberal international order or the rules-based order. And we did it because it was in our interest. And we've now ended up taking a number of very public steps that show that we don't really take the rules-based order all that seriously. I mean, we're protecting Israel at every point. We veto UN Security Council resolutions. We're putting pressure on the ICC to rule in ways that are favorable to Israel, and so forth and so on. And this can only make us look like giant hypocrites who don't really take the rules-based order seriously unless the rules favor us. If the rules don't favor us, we disobey them. Or we rewrite the rules. That's the way a lot of people around the world think about how the United States deals with the rule-based order. And as you said, when you're in a multipolar world, this is problematical because the other two great powers in the system have quite a bit of weight and can do all sorts of things to undermine the rules-based order. And if you look at the Chinese, what they're doing is they're creating institutions of their own. They're trying to create an order of their own with things like the AIIB and so forth and so on. And this is bad news for us.
One of the topics on which you most focus as an academic and a scholar is the question of great powers and how they behave in the world, what motivates them. And I think central to that is this idea that if you want to be a great power, there needs to be credibility to your statements. When you issue warnings, when you make statements about your intentions, you have to follow up on those. Otherwise, you will be perceived as at least unreliable, if not in some way weak. Here we have Joe Biden over the past 8 months inflicting on himself, accepting a series of humiliations. He called the Israeli invasion of Rafah a, quote, red line, which is president speak for if you do this, there will be serious consequences. The Israelis immediately said, we're going to violate that and ignore it. We don't care about your red lines. And they invaded Rafah. And now the White House is left to try and say why it's not a full invasion. He didn't totally disobey Biden. At the same time, you have the Americans saying they wanted to bring aid into Gaza because the population is facing famine and malnourishment by land, and the Israelis basically said no. And so Biden was forced to build a pier because our own ally, whose war we're funding, said we're not going to allow you to bring this aid in by land. And so we had to go build a pier, and now it's a pier that the minute some rain came, broke up into small little pieces and floated away. In all of the studying that you've done, say in the post-World War II era about America standing in the world, have you seen the willingness of the United States government to accept one humiliation after the next, the way they've done over the last 8 months in service of Israel?
No, I have never seen anything like this before. Look, as a good realist, I believe that material power, hard power, matters the most. But like any sophisticated realist, I fully understand that soft power, diplomacy, your reputation, your credibility, all of these things also matter. It can't be pure hard power. And the truth is that the United States has always actually been very good at exercising soft power. We're very good at putting a velvet glove over the mailed fist, to put it in simplistic terms. And when it comes to what the Biden administration has been doing, we're not showing any evidence that we maintain our ability to exercise soft power. It looks like we've lost the magic touch, so to speak, and the consequences of this are grave.
Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.